if my husband were to, God forbid, pass away, I would be in big trouble. So financially. So I've got to ensure that event. It's thinking about what would impact me in a way that I can't handle on my own, and that is the risk that you're passing on.
Welcome to Checks and Balances, The Takeover. I'm Makayla.
And I'm Jess.
And today we're talking about habits that you might think are saving you money, but are actually making you more poor.
Yeah. And we do recognize, of course, it's obviously been a tough couple of years. The economy is not doing us any favors. Cost of living has skyrocketed. We know this. We don't need to repeat it. I think just for us to acknowledge before heading into some of these points that, of course, it's not going to be possible for everybody to not behave this way, but we just really wanted to provide the information for you to consider it, because if you are in the position to do things a little differently, it might actually be better for you in the long run.
This episode is kind of unpacking some things that you think are, oh, I'm saving so much money by doing this, but in reality, you're just costing yourself more money over time. Not everyone can do these more longer term decisions, but we can give it a go.
Habits that feel cheap but actually end up being expensive in the long run. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so the first one, this is actually probably a really good one for me and you to compare, because always choosing the cheapest option is maybe something that I'm guilty of.
Yeah, and I never do that.
So how is spending more money going to save me money in the long run?
Well, okay, I feel like this doesn't apply to everything, but a lot of the times spending more money up front on the better product or the more well-constructed thing, it's going to last you a lot longer. So rather than you buying the same pair of shoes every 6 months because they fall apart, you can buy one pair of shoes that lasts you a few years.
Yes. Or for example, I had a Temu umbrella for $8, which was barely holding on. And for my birthday, the girls got me a Blunt umbrella, which is going to last me far longer.
Shout out Blunt.
So yeah. So that's probably another good example. And actually, interestingly, so 59% of consumers say that they've had to replace a cheap product sooner than expected, often within the first year. And that's from Consumer NZ 2023.
I feel like this was a habit that my parents instilled really heavily in me, which is interesting when I think about it, because we actually grew up quite seemingly poor. But my mom always pushed, if you're going to spend your money, especially when I first got a job and had a bit of spending money, if you're doing it, literally buy the cashmere sweater. And I had that sweater till I was 22.
Interesting.
But things like that, just, spend more money up front.
Yeah. And so I think we've focused particularly on the essentials like shoes, tools, appliances, a good jacket, things like that are quite practical, and you're going to need it for quite a long time. If you're looking at things fast fashion is a whole other episode, but if there's something sort of coming into fashion, you think, oh, that's probably not really such a timeless piece that I'm going to have forever. It's that's different, right? But if you've got something that you're going to need for a long time, you might as well buy a quality one if you can.
I also feel like this applies to home renovations.
Oh yeah.
So we renovated our house a few years ago, our kitchen mainly. And there was a couple things that we did cheaply, thinking this is great, cuts down the budget. One being our flooring. However, it's only been 3 years and the flooring is already starting to peel up. So yeah, it's not just, clothing and everyday items. It can be bigger things too.
Yeah. Well, speaking of bigger things, what about a car?
Yes.
So driving an old, cheap car. Now, again, not everybody is in a position to buy a decent car, and we're not encouraging people to run out and get finance per se for a decent car either.
Yeah, that's a big caveat. Do not take out a loan for a fancy car and justify it because of this episode.
Exactly. But, I mean, when we moved back to New Zealand, we obviously had to buy a car, and I sat, as you can imagine, with spreadsheets in front of me going, well, maybe I'm going to spend a little bit more on a car that's a bit more fuel efficient, and what's the difference actually going to be over the long term in terms of what I'm paying for petrol. So I was sitting there running calculations, looking up the litre per 100 kilometres. Oh, Makayla's giving me a look right now.
A little bit.
Of course. But yeah, that's sort of the process I went through when deciding, and I spent more on a car than I probably would have had I not gone and done that research and realized the payoff in the long term.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think this is definitely one of those points that won't work for everybody. But another way you could look at this too is if you're budgeting for a vehicle, also purchasing it from a more reliable location that's maybe done all those pre-checks versus doing it off Trade Me, and you're just getting the car and you have no idea what condition it's actually in. You've just made sure it could drive.
That's so true.
Just like doing a bit more research and making sure you're getting like the best quality car
that you can for your budget. Yeah. And for like, do you have somebody that you take with you to go see a car?
Yeah, my husband.
Oh, that's good. Blade, bless him. Doesn't know cars. So I'm always like, Dad, and I've got some family who are mechanics and things. So
outing Blade.
Yeah. But that sort of, I think you've got to think about the repairs that are potentially going to come with a cheaper, older car. There's quite a high chance, especially if you don't have somebody who knows what they're doing when they come and look at the car with you, you're going to end up spending potentially thousands on repairs over time, you know?
Okay, so the next couple ones are kind of around the spending to save mentality. So sometimes a small upfront cost can actually lead to the bigger savings down the track rather than just doing the small incremental spending. So a big example of this is food. Buying in bulk rather than going to the grocery store a couple times a week.
Yeah. So if you are not in a position to do a weekly shop, for example, and you need to go to the shops every couple of days to get your food, you statistically end up spending more because you are buying little bits of things that maybe you don't use the whole lot. So if you are able to do a full weekly shop, plan your meals, buy exactly what you're going to need for that week. There's less waste. You can buy more food in bulk and overall save money. And I think this is one that's a little bit of an illusion. You kind of pop to the shop every second. And because like when you live in a big city as well, and you're walking instead of driving and things like that, it feels like, you know, I'm going to the supermarket. I only spent $20.
I only got 3 things.
Yeah, I only got 3 things. And it's like, actually, that does build up and you're better to buy in bulk.
Yeah. And there's lots of options to do that. I mean, we have Costco now. I love Costco. Costco's great. I mean, mind you, there is a membership. So that probably is that like little upfront cost thing. But if you have especially if you have a big family and you have the space to actually store some of that stuff, but buying the essentials that you know you need, like flour, toilet paper, like things that you can just stock up in your pantry or your storage area rather than having to buy them quite frequently is good.
And then if somebody doesn't have like that, this is the whole, it's expensive to be poor concept, because if somebody actually doesn't have the space to buy in bulk, they do have to buy those things in smaller portions, and that is more expensive. So, you know, if you're living in a townhouse, for example, limited storage, Costco is kind of out of scope for you. You can't go there.
Well,
you
to
don't
be
get
fair,
the benefit.
I'm saying it's great, but we actually stopped shopping there because we don't have any storage in our house and there was nowhere to put stuff. So like occasionally we'll use a friend's membership to pick up, like, you know, if we're trying to fill the freezer with meat or something, but like it just wasn't worth it for us anymore.
No.
But what I will say is worth it for us is doing that planning, like you said, and not just, I went to the supermarket and I just saw everything, so I bought everything, rather than like, this is my list of things I'm cooking this week or the next couple weeks, and limiting it to those items.
Do you know what I swear by is click and collect? Because even though I spend $6 on the actual click and collect function, I swear I spend less overall, because I can quite literally go into the vegetables and be like, I need 200 grams of potatoes and buy exactly that much. Yeah. And so, you know, whereas if you're in the shop and then you're walking through the shop and you just grab stuff as you see it.
I'm guilty as that. Yeah. Don't shop when you're hungry.
One that comes to mind a lot is gym memberships. So if you can afford, and it's the same with a lot of insurance premiums, Pocketsmith, for example, if you pay quarterly or annually, they provide you with a pretty chunky discount on the overall cost. And if somebody is not in a position to be able to do that, they end up spending more overall. So if you're paying monthly, weekly for the gym or whatever it is, maybe you've got the option to stay flexible, but it is costing you more.
Yeah, I agree.
And if you think about that across your whole household's worth of services, that difference could probably be quite substantial.
Yeah, one that I want to mention is like apps in the app store on your phone, right? Sometimes when you you download one and it gives you the option, if it's something that has a subscription, to pay like $100 for the year or $50 a month, like, you know,
That's
some
a
drastic
classic
difference.
one. Yeah.
But I always choose the monthly or the weekly because I'm like, oh, I'll probably only use it like a couple of times.
Yeah.
And then the amount of times I've ended up like re-downloading an app that I like and then paying all over again the same like monthly fee.
It was the commitment up front that
It
you're like,
is
no
kind of.
thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
I'm scared of
painful.
commitment.
Yeah. Well, speaking of commitment, let's talk about renting versus mortgages.
Ooh, okay, juicy.
So renting, obviously, at the moment is cheaper than having a mortgage. So you kind of think, well, I'm saving money because I'm not paying off a big chunky bit of debt on a home that
And you're
I own.
less committed.
James and I have actually just done a episode on rent vesting and why that potentially would be more expensive for you over time. So I recommend checking that out. But even though a mortgage feels like the big, chunky, expensive thing right now, over the long term, especially if you're younger and you've got lots of time to pay the mortgage off, it's quite possible that's going to be the better option for you over the long term.
Yeah, I think like that's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately because I was considering selling like our house because, well, we don't need to get into it. But I thought, you know, maybe we'll do the renting thing for a little bit just so we can get into like an area we like in a bigger house for a while. But then as you've done the research, but also thinking about it, like we can pay the mortgage off now. And when we're old and retired, like we did that episode ages ago about what the costs are in retirement versus the income you get from the government.
Yeah.
And not having your own home mortgage free is like such a massive impact on your retirement. So that kind of freaks me out a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm like, even though I hate my house, I think I'd rather just pay it off and at least
have equity.
You know,
this is the thing. You're building equity in the asset as opposed to paying a landlord for theirs.
So that's again like the upfront costs, but it is kind of like a long-term savings because although it's not like an actual savings account, it is kind of something you can use in emergencies in the future or it will help you in your retirement or there's so many things.
Yeah. And again, like caveats is not personal advice. You know, it depends on your situation. But if you're in a position to buy a home, even though it feels bigger and it feels more expensive, you do have to think about the long-term
And you don't have to live in it. Like, you know, a little investment property. I don't know. It's not advice.
No, now we're talking about rent vesting.
Oh, sorry. What you were saying at the very beginning of that, which is you spend less on rent and more on a mortgage here. Yeah. I found that really interesting when I moved to New Zealand because at least where I'm from in Canada, pretty much in all scenarios, a mortgage is cheaper than renting.
It used to be. It used to be like that here. Okay. So I remember, I think it was before I left for the UK, maybe, the only barrier was really the deposit. So once you got a deposit, a mortgage was sort of fine. Yeah. And mortgage rates were way down. Whereas now it's switcheroo.
Yeah, so that's how it was when I left Canada. And like when I bought my house over there, it was literally just like, okay, I need to scrape together just the minimum deposit. And then once I was in, it was so much cheaper than what I was paying in rent. It felt like a relief.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get back there one day.
Maybe one day. Well, hopefully. The other big one, which comes up a lot in my job and actually in yours as well, is insurance.
Yay.
And insurance, nobody likes talking about the scenarios in which you claim this type of insurance, things like health, life, income protection. Yes, they can be expensive. Yes, it's annoying. And ideally, I say this to my clients all the time, in an ideal world, you never ever claim on any of this insurance and you are just paying money to somebody else just in case. Like that's the reality of it. But if you don't have this insurance, the outcomes could be devastating financially for you and your family. Perfect example is life insurance. If you've got, you're a couple with children, you've got a mortgage, you should have life insurance because if one of you die, and talk to somebody about what levels are appropriate, but if you die, what happens to your partner? Are they going to be able to handle that debt on their own? What are they doing with the kids and the childcare? You've got to think about these things, and it is a shame you're kind of spending money on something that, like I say,
you will never see the.
You don't want to see the outcome.
You don't want to
see the outcome of, but you've got to think about what if, which is really morbid, but you've got to do it.
Yeah. And the health insurance is massive too. Like I was recently in the hospital and I had to actually take out like half of our emergency fund just for like all the crazy costs that were happening at the time. Because I have the health insurance, we pretty much got all of it back after I put my claims through. So if I didn't have the insurance, that would have just wiped out a huge chunk of our savings, and that would have set us back a bit. So.
And that's the purpose, I think, of insurance. Like, it's really important whenever you're speaking to an advisor or you're thinking through your insurance, what you're doing is outsourcing risk. You're going, what risk am I willing to retain? What stuff can I actually handle on my own? For example, I can handle paying for a GP appointment.
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm not going to insure that. If my husband were to, God forbid, pass away, I would be in big trouble. So I've got, and financially, so I've got to insure that event. You know, it's thinking about what would impact me in a way that I can't handle on my own. And that is the risk that you're passing on. So, yeah, I think that's a huge one. And unfortunately, if you can't afford insurance and something like that does happen, and I think this is the point with all of these things that we're talking about, right, is that people will find themselves in a loop of that they can't crawl out of because they're spending these bits of money on these different things in a way that's not efficient, and because they quite literally can't afford to. So I think for everybody who's in a position to be able to make these changes in their lives, it's pretty important and to ensure that you don't end up in that position.
Yeah, and like it's so easy, especially right now, to end up in the endless cycle of debt or being behind because of things like this. And once you're in that pattern, I've been in that pattern before. It's really, really hard to get out of.
Yeah.
But there is a way, mostly it means sometimes upping your income somehow. But once you can get out of it, just keep those habits that will keep you out of that cycle.
That brings to mind the Debt-Free Diva as well, Tracy, who we did a podcast episode with, right? She's a great example of somebody who's managed to pull her way out of a pretty dire situation. So I recommend checking that out if you do find yourself feeling a bit that way. So key takeaways for us today are thinking about, I like this one, do the 10-year test. Is this going to cost me more or less over a decade? That's a good one. What else we got?
Know your real cost per use. So this
Nice.
Probably comes down to more small items, but $100 jacket worn 100 times, $1 a use. Cheap.
That is girl math, eh? That's what girl math is. I've been thinking this about, I have an op shop shirt that I love, which cost me $6 and I wear it all the time. And I think, what?
I feel like a negative cost.
I was like, what? I'm making money.
You.
Yeah, that's right. The next one is spending strategically to save. So just keep all of the things in mind in terms of reliable transport, having quality products where you need to, making the food shop a weekly planning exercise, shopping for the whole week.
What all of this encompasses is, are the habits that you think are frugal and beneficial for your life actually beneficial, or are they costing you more money in the long term? That's it.
Exactly that. Love it. Well, something for everyone to think about. Thank you to Lighthouse for sponsoring this episode. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.